I went to community college to begin with. I had dropped out of high school, and I wouldn't take the LSAT. I hadn't taken the LSAT. By the time I was at community college for a few years, I thought it was unfair because I was no longer a high school student, so I would have some, I don't know what my problem was, some weird advantage, I guess, from having been at community college for 2 years, so I wouldn't take the LSAT. And so, I first transferred to University of Oregon, and I found that after being there for a couple terms, it just wasn't where I wanted to be. They had a particular creative writing program, and that's what I was going to focus on. It's called the KID program. But I didn't fit in there for whatever reason. I felt very, very lonely. And then I knew that the other nearby school that had a creative writing major was Linfield. And so I looked into it. I visited the school, and I just felt really at home here. And so then transferred to Linfield after taking a term off and a summer off. And it just felt like the right place for me. I was really happy here.
As a first generation college student, I did question where I wanted to go, what college I wanted to attend. So my initial thought was to go to community college also. But I had a lot of amazing teachers, supportive teachers in high school who were like, you have the ability to go to a 4-year university where you're going to be able to succeed and just make a lot of connections. So I actually toured Linfield 3 times, if I remember correctly. Wow. So the first time that I toured Linfield was through my AVID class, which is like a college readiness program for high school students. And that was the first time that I stepped on Linfield, and I was like, okay, this school, it's a small environment, and my high school was pretty small, so I was like, I would be able to be successful here. And then the second time that I toured Linfield was through a Path to Scholarship workshop with Gerardo Ochoa, who happens to be the vice president for enrollment here at Linfield. And of course, he started talking about how to apply for scholarships, how to apply for the college admission process, and all of these things that you do out of high school. And then he talked about how he went to an Ivy League, and that's when I saw him as a role model, basically. So that's when that was the second time that I really connected to the school. I was like, oh, they have a great leader at this university, so I could probably work with him in the future or something like that. And then when it came to deciding what college I wanted to come to, of course, both of my parents worked. They still work in the field, and they currently live in Mexico, but they have been farm workers their entire life. So the financial aspect was a challenge for me. So when I received my financial aid package from Linfield, Linfield happened to be the school who awarded me the most money in scholarships, and they offered me particularly the first generation student scholarship, which is an amazing program, comes with a mentorship program. So ultimately I decided to come to Linfield, and I decided to major in Spanish and secondary education. So yeah.
Well, I should say also, when I visited, that wasn't my first time here. When I was a high school student, they had this, I don't know that they still do, but they had this program where student writers from high schools would come and do kind of like a miniature writing conference, a festival here at Linfield. And the first time I came to Linfield, I was about 16, and I read a poem in the auditorium in this building. And that's, I think, probably honestly when it first dawned on me that I might want to go here.
Nice. Yeah, so similar connections. I think that, when I came to Linfield and I really saw myself being in a classroom over here. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
I think why Linfield felt at home, I suppose, was that it had to do with the small size. That the professors could really sort of focus on their students. something as simple as sort of remembering who you are and remembering details about you, and you can pick up on conversations that you had started to have maybe a day before, and so I think the size of it was helped me to feel at home here.
Yes, I do not have a very common situation in high school. Was basically living with my uncle during my high school years, but then he unfortunately got deported. So that's when I basically became independent. So I was working, I was paying for my own rent and for my own needs, but I just couldn't afford anymore supporting myself. So I was almost close to becoming homeless. But at that time, he's still my best friend. I talked to my best friend about my situation, and then he was like, okay, let me talk to my parents if you can move in with us. And I was like, you know what, like, yeah, that would be great. Even if it's the garage, I would be happy to go in there and just have a place where I could sleep, I guess. So he did. His mom called me, and then she was like, yeah, you can move in with us, and then we'll be able to support you until you graduate from high school. So at that time, I was just basically living at their home. Unfortunately, during 2020, COVID happened. So I did not graduate. I did, but I just didn't have a normal graduation. And then, so when it came to college, I was just ready to come and move in, because I knew that it was gonna be a fresh start for me. So I remember the day that I moved in, I just came in with my luggages, and then walked up the stairs, and then opened my room, and I saw a bed, I saw a desk, I saw a closet. I was going to be able to just basically peacefully live, be successful on my own. And of course, the cafeteria was there. I was going to have a place where I could just go and get my meals for the day. There was Wi-Fi, which to me, that's like a luxury, because not a lot of families are able to afford that. So yeah, I guess just coming into Linfield was like a fresh start. It was a place where I found stability for myself.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I remember coming to Linfield for the first time. I remember opening the door and seeing the bed and dresser. I don't think I had a desk. I bought a fold-out desk and I put it in the closet because it felt like it was another room, and I had like a little writing space. It was a very tiny room. It was very, closet width, but I had a desk in there, or a table, and I had a chair. But yeah, I remember that feeling.
To me, it was actually like a different feeling that I had, like a different experience, I would say. For example, of course, both of my parents live in Mexico right now. So my friend came to drop me off when I moved in. And I remember my roommate moving in with his parents, and they asked him, like, is there anything else that you need, to him? And it felt very, I don't know, like an emptiness, to not have someone to ask you like that kind of question, a simple question, yet very, I don't know, impactful to many people,
Before I came to Linfield, I was very serious about wanting to be a poet. And I had been since I was, again, about 16 years old. But when I came here, sort of, working with the professors and having conversations with them about poetry in particular, focused me on becoming a poet as a goal. As I said, I wanted to do it, but I guess talking with the professors gave me some sense of what that might be like, and a better sense of what I would need to do. And of course, it was the suggestion of a professor here, Lex Runciman, that got me to apply to the grad school that I ended up going to, the Iowa Writers Workshop. And also it was something that he said about punctuation in poems was really sort of the first spur to writing the poems that ended up being in my first book years later, thinking a bit about what he had said about having punctuation in poems. And so there's several ways in which a lot of my life now I can trace back directly to being here. And so I would say that how I changed while I was here, and maybe grew, I don't know, was insofar as this is a place from which I can say, or at which I can say that my life began in a lot of ways, which is a pretty big change.
Very, very interesting, because I do not, well, I love reading poems. I'm just not a good writer when it comes to poems. But for me, I guess how I changed over the years here at Linfield, I think it would be with questioning my identity, and also I don't know, being able to just take care of myself. So I think coming from a Hispanic background or Latinx background, we always feel the pressure of doing good at everything that we do. So that's how, when I just came here, I was like, okay, I cannot let my parents down. I cannot let my family down. I should be able to just do great. To my parents' school is just learning. To them, it's a very different situation. So I guess how I have learned, what I have learned here at Linfield is to take care of myself and be and just take time for myself. I think that in our Latino families that does not exist. Mental health does not exist because we're always on a go-go mode, on survival mode. So that's one of the things that I have been able to learn. But also, as I mentioned about my identity, I think that the first time that I was able to question my identity was when I studied abroad in Spain. And the question of who am I representing? If the US, which is where I live, or Mexico, which is my parents' background. So throughout my time here, I have been able to just create my own identity. Like, I am both at the same time. Sure. I am able to speak 2 languages. I am able to form this new language, which is Spanglish, and we even have a Spanglish Day here at Linfield, which is a great event that celebrates our culture. So yeah, there's so many ways that I have grown, I guess. This is funny because I think, as I mentioned, I'm a first-generation college student. So my parents, of course, did not expect for me to become a teacher. They were expecting like a doctor. They were expecting like an architecture, an engineer, someone who, of course, would make a lot of money. But as I mentioned, my high school, I would say that my high school career was probably like the hardest chapter of my life. But it was also the place where I was able to have a lot of learning experiences, and the place where I found a lot of support through both my friends and the staff. So I was, challenged with learning English as a high school student, and I was also challenged with living without my immediate family for the first time. So I think that when I was choosing a career, I was thinking of who were the people who impacted me the most throughout my life. And I think that teachers were the most impactful. I don't always think of one teacher because I had so many great teachers throughout my life. But I do have one specific teacher, and her name is Mrs. Chelsea Frankovich. She was my Spanish and avid teacher. So she basically inspired me to seek out other opportunities in higher education and to not get stuck after high school. So, and it was basically because of her that I chose to major in Spanish. and basically pursue a career because I saw her as a role model to me. And now that I am a student teacher, I am able to see myself represented in the students that I work with. I remember myself being there in that position, not knowing what I wanted to do for my future. And, I always tell them, like, it's okay, you don't have to know, but there's always like a purpose that in your life that you will find eventually.
Yeah, sure.
So that was my inspiration.
That it's an inspiring story. My story about how I was inspired to become a teacher is not an inspiring story. It's not. I mean, in some ways, a lot of poets in America are either professors or trying to become professors. And so there was a sense that if I was going to be a writer, one of the things that I was going to do was teach at the university level. It just seemed not arbitrary, but a predetermined thing. Once I started doing it, I discovered I really, really love it. But it hadn't, that was just fortuitous. But I, initially really wanted to come back to Linfield to teach. I was really hopeful because of the time that I had here, and because, again, Lex Runciman seemed to me like a model of how one could be a teacher, and how being a teacher, one could be useful to other people. Just really so much of how I thought I ought to live my life and what I ought to do comes from knowing Lex while I was here.
I recently had an interview and they asked me, like, what kind of challenges do you think you might encounter? And I mean, life has just, I don't know how to say it nicely, but has just like got me through like worse things that I think a challenge is just now a learning opportunity to me. And so that's what I tell like my students, for example, like this is a learning opportunity to like you guys to learn a new language. And I know it's hard, but at the end you're gonna see the results. And the advice that I would give, I think it would be to just keep pushing. I know everyone says it, but nobody's gonna do it for you or oneself unless we do it. And of course to always seek out help. I think there's always, we never notice this, but there's always someone out there willing to help us with whatever situation there is. Ask questions. I think that I struggle with this even today. I think asking questions is one of the hardest things, but if you ask a question and no question is dumb, someone's going to be able to help you out there.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good suggestions. All I would say, I suppose, maybe to my younger self or someone in a similar circumstance, because I certainly didn't at the time, and maybe you had a different experience. I think when you're in the midst of such things, at least for me, I never found myself thinking, okay, I'm in a battle for survival. I wasn't like, I was just, you're living from one day to the next and you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And it's very hard to detach yourself from the context and observe, how you're surviving, because it's your life, right? And so I don't think I was really thinking in those terms. But what seems to have been useful in retrospect was having a goal, was having a thing that I wanted to do, which was that I wanted to become a writer, and having a sense of, trying to work toward that thing, made any other difficulty that I encountered relatively insignificant.
I would just say that I admire you because I think writing poetry is hard. I mean, I took a poetry class in Spanish, and I mean, just thinking about the words that you need to choose to convey a message.
Sure.
I think that's just admirable. And I see my friends, she just likes writing poems for fun, and I'm always, how do you think about these words? Like, I could never think about this. So,
you know, I mean, in some ways, I suppose I could say the same thing. I mean, I can tell you're very serious about teaching. I mean, I'm serious about teaching too, but I think I admire the kind of seriousness that I can tell you bring to it. You know, I think I just don't interact with teaching in that way, and I'm very serious about it, but I think my approach to it is different, and I kind of wish I had, from what I can see, I kind of wish I had your approach. So yeah, I admire it a lot.
I mean, it's also we work with different levels.
Yeah,
so
sure. Sure,
yeah.
I do.